Well, my friends, we're going to go ahead and get started on the bearings. We'll start with the bigger one here. We've already done one of these molds. Gotta get my screws out. But for those of you that may not have ever seen any of this before, the black section is a core print, and we just made the cores. So we're going to round this up in sand, and it's going to come out with this configuration. And from there, we will lay the sand core that we made where this black area is. That will rest down in there and help create the void. Dave Clark made this pattern along with the gates. We already did one. If I didn't say, I'm going to change things up a little bit. He made two risers to go on the top of this, which I like the idea. I like that. But what happened was they were sticking up beyond my flask, and it was hard for me to get the top part of it flat. And what I'm worried about is when we go to pour it, I'm afraid the top's going to bust on us because we just couldn't strike it off good and flat. So what I'm going to do is just punch 2 1.5-inch open risers instead of those in that place, and we ought to be good. This is going to be the cope side, and we're going to start off with the drag. The gate system is actually going to be in the drag. So we're going to put it about right there. And this same gate system, if it doesn't break on us, we're going to use it on the other sides as well. And I'm going to give myself plenty of room over here for my pouring basin on the coat, which is going to be up here when I flip this over. I'm not too worried about how close this is to the flask because this is the core print, as I said, and the core is actually, there's not going to be any molten metal anywhere near here. It's going to be at least 3 fingers away there. And I messed up and I got the sand a little too wet. But that's okay, we will torch it. And I'm not worried about getting facing sand all the way around the core print. We had a Windy Hill wedding the other day here, guys. Here's a little footage of it. Of course, we didn't, we were not dressed for the occasion. But we did shut the foundry down to give them a little peace and quiet out there as they were doing it. This was right over the hill here, so I decided to just set the camera up and shoot a little footage for you guys. It's not every day we have a wedding out here. Doing this to get it as flat as I can. If you do diagonal passes, kind of like hand planing, you can achieve a pretty good flat surface. I meant to do that. Now I'm not going to worry about blocking up these holes here. That was originally the way Dave has this. He had these risers in the holes. And like I said, if my flask were that high, I could get away with that and then not have to worry about striking off really flat on top. I put a quarter there to stop up the pull hole where we don't have sand get packed down in there and then I have to dig it out. Go ahead and lay the other top, and our riser, we're going to have an open riser, which is also going to be 1.5 inches here. I'm going to have 2 open risers here and 1 here. I don't know that I'm going to need that. The thing is, I'm going to have 3 holes here if I do that, which could weaken my sand. I don't want to do that. Now, if I can get away with putting a sprue here and a riser here, preferably, I'd like to put my riser here. But he's already got a stop here for an alignment for that, so we'll probably do that. That's better. It's not perfect, but it's better. And this just keep this layer of sand from bonding to the next layer as we ram it. If you don't put this down, you're going to have a hard time pulling it apart. I don't get a chance to reply to all the comments, but I do read them. And I remember somebody asking what I use for parting dust. And somebody else answered the question, but he gave him the wrong answer. And if I didn't pay so much for this stuff, it wouldn't bother me. But I'm not using talc, guys. This is called Duck's Back. My friend Benjamin Bronze introduced me to this stuff several years ago, and I love it. And it's not cheap because I have to pay so much for it. Kind of get my feathers ruffled when somebody accuses me of using talc.
I don't use talc.
It doesn't work as well as this. Once you go with Duck's Back, you never go back.
That's what they say.
Uh-huh. I called the streetcar museum the other day to check on the status of the castings that we made for them. It said they arrived, yet they didn't know it. So I was getting worried. Luckily, they got back to me. They said somebody else had accepted them and put them up in the car barn. So take a sigh of relief there. I'll lock that all in place. Yeah, I'm going to tell you, Josie was sick the other day, and I'm not feeling too good today. I'll live, but man, it's hard to stay focused and stay busy when you're not feeling it. Important that we keep this coat flat. We don't want any dips, any low spots. We want to have this super flat because, as I said, we're going to have weights on this. We're going to have a lot of weights on this one. And we want to make sure we don't have any areas that are prone to lift up and break through the coat. That's pretty good. Got a spot there, but I'm not worried about that. Most of the pressure is going to be right here in the middle. Am I forgetting anything? Nope. And hit it again. But again, it pulled cleans. The pattern maker, luckily, put plenty of draft angle on it for me. We're going to take our quarter out. Now, I have to pull this first and then this because this hooks up under this part, remember? Yeah, look at that. I ain't even got to wrap it. It's important to keep this plane and the plane of the parting line parallel as you come up with it. Good job, Dave. I'll tell you what's a headache, and that's when that center hub, which I don't think I'm going to have a problem with these, but when that thing breaks off, man, it makes you want to just start screaming. Now, wiggle it a little bit and see if we can avoid having to wrap that. Because that broke off on me on the other mold. I'll dust it right here and here. There's just a little feathered edge that I want to sweep a radius into, just like that. Just keep any hot tear out of it. Put a radius there. That usually takes care of that. I think we're good. Mr. Pete. Every time I use these bellows, I think of him. He gave me these. And honestly, this is probably one of the best molding tools you can have. Especially if your airline's, say, full of water. I'm going to set that in place. Like I said, the sand is a little wet, or a little on the damp side, so I'm going to cook this. But I'm going to go ahead and put it on the conveyor first. And we're going to go ahead and coat it with graphite. Normally I only do this for iron pours, but we're going to see if that helps with the finish on the core sand. It should. Now these cores go in the kiln, and I bring it up to about 250. And I leave it there overnight to thoroughly drive off any possible moisture. You do not want that in a core. You will blow a mold in a heartbeat like that. Also going to get a little bit of the inner face there. Yeah, I had a mold blow on me one day. It scared me to death. And it was because I did not dry the core out thoroughly. Regardless of how dry I try to keep my sand, there's always going to be some moisture in it, especially down here in this Mississippi humidity. It's aggravating. All right. It's good enough. So the way I have that, it's this little diagonal key goes in with this one. We're going to be using this 3 more times tonight. Now remember what I said about putting a riser right here and here and here? Honestly, I'm only going to put one right in this area. Yep. Now, as I said earlier, You don't want any kind of sharp intersections anywhere on that, so I'm going to work a radius into it. This has kind of a spherical end on it, so I'm just rolling it around like that. Trying not to break that sand. So we got 2 down, 1 to go, 2 more to go. Well, as much as I hated to cut those pretty bearings, I was going to try to hold off on them, and in case Keith needed a backup set later down the road. But we ended up having to cut them in half. They needed about a 1/4 inch less in order to fit down in the bottom of that crucible. Well, that wasn't going to work, so I ended up having to slice them in half. And anyway, we weren't going to have enough bronze without putting these back in the melt anyway. So the 2 bearings alone, I'm going to try to pour these on the same batch melt, which should come to 30 pounds just for the bearings, and then you got to add some for the risers, the pouring basin, the gating. So I went ahead and threw an additional 10 pounds on there. So we're going to be pouring 40 pounds for this job for the first 2. I have no idea what the other 2 are going to weigh. They should be slightly less. Just be on the safe side, we'll melt another 40 for that batch, just to make sure. Alright, so this batch is ready. This batch will go in the crucible for the first 2 bigger molds. And just to be on the safe side, I decided to weigh out 40 more pounds for the smaller ones. It shouldn't take as much, but you never know. Well, Keith had sent me a job earlier that had a lot of bronze with it, and he said if I didn't have enough left over from the bigger ones to go ahead and borrow from that job to make the smaller ones. Well, I pulled it out, and if I'm right, I mean, we're going to have a little less material for the second 2 because they're smaller, but I decided to be on the safe side and go ahead and make both batches 40 pounds. That took every bit of it, so we don't have any left over in the reserve. Hopefully we're going to have quite a bit to go back in the ingot tray. We'll see. So this was our first mold that we made, and you got your triangular shaped pouring basin because I had no choice because of the position I had this. If I had moved it that way, I would have had more room to put a proper basin. But we have some dangers here. We've got the risers on each side of it along with back here, and I don't want molten metal spilling from that pouring basin over into any of these 3 holes without filling the mold first. So the way we'll avoid that is we're going to put a fire brick right there and right here. And down here, the only riser that we have is this one back here. I don't know if you can see it. That one may have to be re-poured. This one, definitely, it did not fill all the way. And then on the second run, this one did well. And I stopped before I poured this one. Now, I will explain why. We were running real low on bronze really fast. I want to weigh this and have an approximate value between the casting and the gating and the risering before we pour this last one, just to make sure we fill it correctly. We were running short. There's still part of the, I'm still able to look down the riser hole and see the core in there, so that definitely didn't fill. This one, the first one, I was on the low side at 2,000 degrees, and it was malty looking. I didn't like that. So on the second pour, we went ahead and jacked it on up to 2,100. 2125, I think, was what it was, and it did exactly what it was supposed to. So after doing that, we're going to re-round this one and knock those out if we have enough bronze. If we don't, I'm going to have to come up with a different plan. So I'm going to be able to weigh this one here shortly in the next 30 minutes. And before the day is over with, we'll go ahead and knock this mold out. Alright, so I just broke this one out. And sorry, I thought I had that on video. This is the first one. And based off what I'm looking at, pretty sure we're going to have to recast that. The second one didn't even fill. The third one I feel good about. Well, my friends, as I was saying earlier in the video, Josie had gotten sick and I started coming down with something. The following day, which was a Thursday, I was sick as a dog. I haven't been like that and I don't know when, and I won't go into all the gory details, but I think I had the bubonic plague. This job stopped until now. I finally started getting some strength back. I ended up having to go to the Soule Museum and help my buddy Bob and Greg get a jack shaft installed up high. This is some video of that for the planer that was donated to the museum by Mr. Walter Clemens. Anyway, we got that done. If you remember, we had to go to Belvedere, Tennessee to pick this machine up, and they want to get this up and running for the Steam Festival, November the 3rd and 4th. Make sure you're there. I want to see you there. And back to this job. So there's going to be a part 3, because after I got through at Soule, then Josie and I had to double up and get everything ready for an event we had in Houston, Mississippi, which is also going to be in another video coming up in the next week or two. I might have a 2-for-1. I don't know. Starting off tomorrow, now that we're back, now that that event's over with, now that I'm done at Soule for a little bit, we are going to knock this job out and have a part 3 available for next Sunday. My string of luck this last 2 weeks has just been terrible. But as I said in the video, I figured out what to do different. I did nail it on the casting here. This was the second batch that I was pouring. This one was the first. This one was too cold. As I said, it was malty. And as you examine the surface, you see some weird stuff going on there. So I don't like that. We're gonna jack the temp up to 2125 as I had it with this one. We are scraping the bottom of the barrel to have enough bronze for this job, I think. Keith said to go ahead and just worry about getting the 2 big ones now, get those done. So we're going to focus on them, and then any of the gates, runners, and leftovers after that, we'll focus on the smaller ones again. There's not much of a difference in the weight between this one and that one. I can't wait to tell you about my trip to Houston. I had a great time there. I even got to be on TV. it was very exciting, and I got to shoot an animal. That's going to develop into something else. It's going to happen here every year. But I got to get an anvil. I'm not about to do mine. Now, if you've got a cast iron anvil that's not worth a flip, send it to me. We'll shoot the thing. I hope you guys have a great remainder of the weekend, and I will talk to you later. For those who have been asking about the Windy Hill Foundry hats, these are now available on my website, windyhillfoundry.com, under stores, or you can click on the above link. These are on the pricey side, but keep in mind the shipping is included. Have a good day.